Beyond the Lines.
I have never, ever heard of this model before. It is blowing my mind, JP. It absolutely is. Because, we're all taught big risk, potential big reward, like you said earlier. And this is amazing, just amazing. Why aren't more people investing in these alternative types of investments? Is it a lack of education? What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, remember I told you I went on that journey for 2 years figuring out how to put it together. Well, right. I've still been on a journey since 2013 of figuring out how to explain it. You see, the problem is if somebody doesn't understand something, then they draw back from it, because if you don't understand it, you don't trust it. And so we've really had to learn how to explain it. We've had to learn how to put it into a structure. So I raised money over the last 5 years just from people that knew me and trusted me, or were referred to me by someone that trusted me. And so that helped. There were a lot of layers of trust put on prior to asking for any money from them. So that helped. And it didn't require as big of an education. But now what we've done with this bond offering, and we just, as of the day of this interview, we opened the bond offering 9 days ago, and we have had in 9 days 135 investors request the bond documents. If all of them were to do the minimum investment of $50,000, I can only take 20 of them, because we're only raising $1 million with this round. So, and I've talked, I got a subscription agreement out to a guy today that's coming in for sure. He's doing 100. I got a guy yesterday that's doing 50. So, and a guy I talked to today said he may do up to 500. So it may end up being less than 20 people that get in on this time around. But the thing that what we found and why we did the bond the way we did it is people want something. A lot of the investors we work with and that we attract are either at or in retirement. They're looking for money to supplement their retirement. They're looking for something to make a little bit extra money off their retirement savings, but they cannot afford to lose the money. They don't have the time. Remember, I talked about being younger earlier. If you are, you could take more risk. A person that's at or in retirement cannot afford to start over. And so they're looking for something that has a safe, but as good of a return as they can possibly get. And this is like magic. People are calling us, they're emailing us, they're filling out our form, and they're commenting on our ads. Almost every one of them starts with, okay, so how are you doing this 18% thing? Because it almost seems too good to be true. And all of us are coached and trained over the years that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And I tell them, I say, I agree. If I were in your shoes, I'd feel the same way. But once you understand the business model that's driving these numbers, it's not that difficult. So our money that we put to work from investors, we're taking it for 2 years, but we're cycling that money multiple times. Here's how. Between the time that we buy the ads and the time that we get paid can be anywhere from 45 to 70 days. We allow in our business model up to 90 days. It never takes that long, but up to 90 days. And the reason we're doing that is we know that we can be fully liquid, at least fully liquid 4 times a year. So let's look at that. If I need to, let's say I'm in the coffee business and I've got an order for 10,000 pounds of coffee, and I come to you, Tomas, and I say, I don't have the money to buy the coffee. And you say, I'll give you the money to buy the coffee, JP. And let's say that I've got it sold for $15 a pound, and I know it's going to cost me $10 a pound, so I know I'm going to make $5 off of every pound of coffee. But I got to fly to South America. I got to negotiate with the grower or the distributor down there. I got to get it shipped to the U.S. We have to put it in our warehouse, package it with our stuff, put our label on it, put it in the boxes, ship it out to all of our customers or to a customer that ordered the 10,000 pounds, if it's one customer, ship it out there, invoice them, and wait to get paid. And let's assume, for just giggle's sake, that it's going to be 60 or 70 days from the day I flew to South America and gave them the money that you loaned me, and when I came back and ultimately got paid for that invoice. That is very much like our business model. So we use the investor capital to bridge the difference between when we spend the money to get the new customer leads for them and when we get paid for them. And so going back to that number, if you loaned me $10 and in 90 days or less I made $5 profit off of that, would it be reasonable for me to pay you 15 cents a month for 3 months or 45 cents out of my $5 in profit for the privilege of using your money?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's our business model.
Absolutely.
When you look at it that way, you go, okay, 1.5% a month, because this bond is a 2-year bond that pays 1.5% each month. They get money in their bank account every month by the 15th of the month. So if you put 100,000 in, you get 1,500 on the second month, third month, fourth month, all the way through for 24 months. And then you get your principal back at the end of those 24 months. But me paying you 1.5% out of a 50% return on investment is actually not a bad deal.
So I think what most people would say, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. I'm going to be that really, really conservative investor who hears this and says, okay, there's always a downside, right? What's the downside? How do I lose my money? Let's speak to that. How do you deal with that person who comes to you and says, it does sound too good to be true. There has to be some risk. Where's the risk? How could I potentially lose my money? How do you deal with that?
That's great. So what we did is to protect against the downside risk. There's a very common form of finance out there. People can look it up. It's called receivables finance or contract financing, purchase order financing. So what we did is we set up for this capital raise, the $1 million bond, we created a special purpose vehicle. In the investment world, they call it an SPV, but a special purpose vehicle. But just think of it this way. We set up a new structure that has no operating costs, no employees, no nothing. Its sole purpose is to issue the bonds and raise $1 million in bonds, and then loan that money over to our operating entity in order to run these campaigns. But in the process, this entity is taking a secured interest and actually filing a UCC1 filing. So there's 100% transparency against the collateral of those receivables and contracts. Worst case scenario, and look at this company over here. We have 5 years of operating history with a less than 1% default rate on accounts receivable. Okay. So we're not going anywhere, number one, and our customers who pay their bills are not going anywhere. And this company, this entity over here that issues the bond, the funding vehicle that's going to pay them every month, has a secured interest, collateralized, and a contractual and legal interest in taking control of those receivables or those contracts to claw back its money if it needed to. So we collateralized it and secured it. Now, worst case scenario is this thing is fully liquid in 90 days, and if the wheels came off on everything, then it would be fully liquid in 90 days. It would claw back its $1 million, issue out the principal to all the investors, and everybody would go home. In our operating entity, Harbor City Digital Ventures, Inc., we have 2.7 billion data records. I had an investment banker already tell me, JP, you're sitting on at least $50 to $60 million worth of data. These are records that have name, email address, and phone number, and demographic information, and mortgage information, and credit information, and whether they're retired or employed. And I mean, it ranges from about 5 to 8 fields of data all the way up to some of the records have 256 fields of data attached to each record. It's very, very valuable records. If you look at data, it has a massive value. Recently, when Sports Authority went out of business, Dick's Sporting Goods bought Sports Authority's list and assets. The list, the data was where the value was. And they paid, I forget what it was, but I think it was about 30 cents a name or some number, 13 cents a name. I don't know, whatever it was. It was a pretty big number. And that was at an auction, at a fire sale. So we know that if we were to, even if you look at a penny a record, or 5 cents a record, we're sitting on massive, massive assets. So we're secure, we're solid. We've got 5 years of operating history. We'll have in the next 2.5 weeks, our CPA firm, we hired an outside third-party firm that is actually producing audited financials for us. So no smoke and mirrors, no BS, we have a good business model. We have no dings against us with the SEC or FINRA or Attorney General Office or anything. So, that's about as good as it gets.
Sparky the Fire Dog here. Protect your family from fire. Make sure your home has smoke alarms in every bedroom, outside your sleeping areas, and on every level of your home, even your basement. For games and activities, go to sparky.org.
We want to keep you, your family, and your community safer from fire. This message brought to you by the National Fire Protection Association and your local fire department. Visit sparky.org.
Who is your ideal customer?
For leads or for investors?
For both. I was going to break it down, but thank you for both.
Okay, so for leads, we're looking for companies that are already doing a pretty good volume and looking to grow. It takes as much work to set up a small campaign, a small volume campaign, as it does a large volume campaign. It's just the amount of dollars you're spending through it. Absolutely. So we would rather work with people that want to generate, 5,000, 10,000 leads a week or more, or even a whole lot more. But we work with guys like in the insurance industry. We've got people that have, 500 to 1,000 agents, and they're trying to feed them all leads on a consistent basis. So that's a great kind of business for us. People in the insurance, mortgage, real estate, home services, anyone. We got a guy that looks like he's coming in as an investor, but he also owns a chain of schools and high-end schools and private schools. And he's interested in us generating leads for his private schools. And he's very much right on the edge of the volume thing, but we probably, especially if he becomes an investor, are going to help him out and take good care of him. The numbers are big. These students are worth like $30,000 a year in tuition. So that can make sense for us. So if it's lower volume but a higher ticket, it can make sense. If somebody's doing webinars out there to promote their business and sell their product and they want a predictable flow of leads or registrants into their webinars, we're really good at webinar registrations. If somebody has written a book that is the front end of their marketing process, so they sell or give away a book on a pay-only shipping basis or something like that, and they want tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in their pipeline, those are good for us. Really, it comes down to the numbers. So if, in good marketing, you will know your numbers. And I spoke at an investor meeting last night, did a little fireside chat thing for a bunch of investors and here in my local town. And it was funny because I asked people if they know what the lifetime value of a client is and if they know what the client acquisition cost is for their own businesses and that sort of thing. And most people do not know that number. But once you know what a client's worth to you, once you know what it normally costs you to get one, once you know out of X number of leads what your conversion rate to a buyer is, we can work with that. And if it's not big enough volume for us to make sense, we do have some agency guys that we refer business off to for smaller campaigns. On the investor side, we're with the 506C, which is it's the regulation Reg D 506C. It's according to the Securities Act in the United States. To comply with the Security and Exchange Commission for this raise, we can only accept accredited investors. And that means they have to, so that for people that don't know, and I have accredited investors all the time say, I don't know if I'm accredited, So I always try to explain it so people know. So an accredited investor, according to the SEC, is someone who has $1 million in net worth, excluding the value of their primary residence. So if they've got stocks, bonds, mutual funds, money in cash, money in real estate, and they've got a net asset on that real estate, all of that stuff contributes except for the value of their primary residence. So north of $1 million in net worth, or a single person earning $200,000 a year or more for the last 2 years with the expectations of continuing, or between a couple's income, $300,000 a year for the last 2 years with the expectation of continuing. And so you have to be an accredited investor. So for us, there's a lot of what I call mom and pop accredited investors. They worked hard all their lives. They built a business, or they worked in a career and they've got a pension fund. Maybe they made some wise investments early on, some stocks appreciated, whatever. And they're sitting on $1 million, $1.2 million, $3 million, $5 million, whatever that number is. But a lot of folks are sitting on, let's say it's $1 million in net worth. If you retire on $1 million in net worth and you're making 3 to 5% on that money in safe investments, Well, $30,000 to $50,000 a year doesn't go very far. It doesn't produce much of a lifestyle. And if you want to help your family or take cruises or give to your church or your synagogue or causes or whatever, you're not going to have a lot of money left over. So a lot of those just barely accredited investors with $1 million to $2 million